I was standing at the altar in my wedding dress, about to marry the man I thought was perfect, when my 6-year-old nephew Marcus ran down the aisle and shouted something that made the entire church gasp in horror. My name is Isabella, and I'm about to tell you how a child's innocent question exposed a web of lies that saved me from the worst mistake of my life. I'm a 29-year-old pediatric nurse at Chicago Children's Hospital, the kind of person who works double shifts to cover for sick colleagues and volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. The kind of person who believes in happy endings and second chances. The kind of person who was completely blind to the red flags that everyone else could see. My fiancé, or rather my ex-fiancé, was Ryan Mitchell. At 32, he seemed like everything I'd ever wanted. Tall, handsome, successful financial advisor who drove a BMW and wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. He swept me off my feet with expensive dinners, weekend trips to wine country, and the kind of romantic gestures I'd only seen in movies. My nephew Marcus is my sister Emma's youngest son. 6 years old with curly red hair and freckles covering his nose. He's the kind of kid who asks a million questions, notices everything, and has no filter between his brain and his mouth. The kind of kid who adults underestimate until he drops a truth bomb that changes everything. My sister Emma is 2 years older than me and works as a social worker in downtown Chicago. She's always been the cautious one, the one who researches every purchase and reads every fine print. While I fall in love with the idea of love, Emma sees the world through a more practical lens. She's married to David, a high school math teacher, and they have 3 kids: Sarah, 12, Tommy, 9, and Marcus, 6. Our parents, Robert and Margaret Chen, immigrated from Taiwan when Emma and I were children. Dad runs a small accounting firm, and Mom teaches piano lessons from our childhood home in Chinatown. They raised us to value education, hard work, and family above everything else. They also taught us to trust our instincts and question things that seemed too good to be true. The story really begins 18 months ago when I met Ryan at a hospital charity gala. I was there representing the pediatric ward, wearing a dress I'd bought on clearance and feeling completely out of place among Chicago's elite. Ryan approached me at the bar with a confidence that was both intimidating and intoxicating. "You look like someone who actually cares about the cause tonight," he said, gesturing toward the auction display of items donated for sick children. "Most people here are just networking." We talked for 2 hours about everything from my work with premature babies to his passion for helping families plan their financial futures. He seemed genuinely interested in my stories about the NICU, asking thoughtful questions about the challenges of caring for the tiniest patients. "I've always admired healthcare workers," he told me as the evening wound down. "You're real heroes, making a difference every single day. I just move money around and take a percentage." The first red flag should have been how quickly he inserted himself into my life. By our 3rd date, Ryan was sending flowers to my apartment every Monday morning, always with handwritten notes that seemed to perfectly capture my mood from the weekend. By our 6th date, he'd met my parents and charmed them completely with his knowledge of Taiwanese culture and his respectful bow when introduced. By our 3rd month together, Emma was the only family member expressing any doubts. "Something feels off about him, Izzy," she said one Sunday afternoon while we watched the kids play in her backyard. "He's almost too perfect. The flowers every week, the expensive restaurants, the way he always knows exactly what to say." "That's called being romantic, Em," I laughed, watching Marcus try to teach Tommy how to do a cartwheel. Just because David shows love by doing laundry doesn't mean all men are emotionally constipated. But Emma persisted with her concerns. "Where does he live? You've been dating for 3 months, and you've never been to his place." It was a valid question that I'd been avoiding asking myself. Ryan always insisted on coming to my apartment or meeting at restaurants. When I asked about his place, he had perfectly reasonable explanations that seemed logical at the time, but now, looking back, were clearly rehearsed responses. His condo was being renovated after a water leak damaged the hardwood floors. He had a roommate going through a messy divorce who needed privacy and space. He preferred my neighborhood for the authentic ethnic food options and the sense of community. "I want our relationship to be about us, not about impressing you with my furniture," he'd say, pulling me close on my couch. "This feels more real, more intimate. Your place has character, personality. Mine is just expensive stuff." The romantic gestures escalated as our relationship progressed. Ryan would surprise me with concert tickets to artists I'd mentioned liking in passing conversations. He'd have my favorite Thai food delivered to the hospital during particularly stressful shifts. He remembered details about my patients that I'd shared weeks earlier, asking follow-up questions that made me feel heard and valued. "How's baby Sarah doing?" He'd ask about a premature infant I'd been worried about. Did her lung function improve after the new treatment? These moments of apparent thoughtfulness and care made me fall deeper in love with the idea of him. Here was a successful, attractive man who not only tolerated my demanding career, but celebrated it. He never complained when I had to cancel dates for emergencies or work late on difficult cases. My colleagues at the hospital were initially impressed by Ryan's attention and devotion. Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of pediatrics and my mentor, often commented on how lucky I was to find someone so supportive. "Most men can't handle dating healthcare workers," she told me during a break between surgeries. "The unpredictable hours, the emotional demands, the stress we bring home. Ryan seems to genuinely understand and appreciate what you do." But my friend and fellow nurse, Jessica Martinez, had different concerns. "Has he ever brought you flowers at work?" she asked one afternoon while we were checking on our tiny patients. "I mean, most boyfriends who are that romantic want to show off a little, make sure everyone knows how devoted they are." I realized Ryan had never visited me at the hospital, never met my colleagues in person, never seen me in my work environment. When I mentioned it to him, he had another reasonable explanation. "Hospitals make me nervous," he admitted with what seemed like genuine vulnerability. "My mother spent her last months in intensive care when I was in college. I associate the smell and sounds with losing her. I hope you understand." How could I not understand? His explanation was both plausible and emotionally resonant. I felt guilty for even questioning his absence from my workplace. The proposal came after 14 months of dating, on a perfect October evening at Navy Pier. Ryan had arranged for a private dinner on a yacht, complete with a string quartet and a photographer hidden in the bushes. He dropped to one knee as the Chicago skyline glittered behind him, presenting a ring that must have cost more than I made in 6 months. "Isabella Chen, you've made me believe in love again," he said, tears in his eyes that seemed completely genuine. "You see good in everyone, you care for the most vulnerable members of our society, and you've shown me what it means to put others before yourself. Will you marry me?" The ring was stunning, a 3-carat diamond surrounded by smaller stones, set in platinum. As I said yes through happy tears, I couldn't help but wonder how a financial advisor could afford something so extravagant. But Ryan's explanation seemed reasonable enough. "I've been saving for 2 years," he told me later that night as we celebrated with champagne in my apartment. "Ever since I realized I wanted to spend my life with someone special. I wanted to give you something worthy of how you make me feel." The next morning, photos of our engagement were mysteriously featured in Chicago's Social Scene magazine. Ryan claimed he had no idea how they'd gotten the pictures, but he seemed pleased by the attention. "Now everyone knows I'm the luckiest man in Chicago," he said, kissing my forehead. Looking back, I realized the magazine feature should have raised questions. How did a photographer capture such perfect shots without our knowledge? Why was a financial advisor's engagement newsworthy enough for a society magazine? But I was so caught up in the fairy tale that I didn't think critically about the inconsistencies. Wedding planning revealed more red flags that I chose to overlook because I was so caught up in the romantic whirlwind. Ryan insisted on handling all the major expenses himself, claiming he wanted to give me the wedding of my dreams. The venue, catering, flowers, band, and photography were all arranged through his connections at prices that seemed too good to be true. "I work in finance, sweetheart," he'd say when I questioned the numbers. "I know how to negotiate. Plus, I've been building relationships in this city for years. People owe me favors." The Millennium Knickerbocker Hotel, one of Chicago's most prestigious venues, was supposedly giving us their ballroom for half the usual rate because Ryan had helped the manager with his investment portfolio. The catering company, known for serving Chicago's elite, was offering premium service at budget prices because Ryan had connected them with other high-profile clients. Every vendor had a similar story. Ryan had done them some financial favor, and they were repaying his kindness with discounted wedding services. The coincidences seemed remarkable, but not impossible. Emma's concerns intensified as the wedding date approached. She started asking pointed questions that made family dinners uncomfortable and tense. Isabella, have you been to Ryan's office? Met his colleagues? Seen any documentation of his business? Emma, stop interrogating my fiancé, Mom would interject, clearly smitten with Ryan's respectful manner and expensive gifts. Isabella is lucky to find such a successful, handsome man who treats her like a princess. But Emma wouldn't let it go. As maid of honor, she had access to wedding vendor contracts and invoices. She noticed that all the payments were being made in cash, unusual for someone in the financial services industry who should have access to business accounts and credit lines. Cash payments for a wedding this expensive raise red flags, Izzy, Emma told me 2 weeks before the ceremony. This isn't how legitimate business people operate. Maybe he's trying to help vendors avoid transaction fees, I suggested weakly, even as doubt began creeping into my mind. Or maybe he's trying to avoid creating a paper trail, Emma countered. When was the last time you talked to any of his friends? Met anyone from his work? Seen his tax returns or bank statements? The truth was, I hadn't. In 18 months of dating, Ryan had successfully kept all those aspects of his life separate from our relationship. He claimed to be private about mixing business and personal matters, and I'd accepted that explanation because I wanted to believe him. His social circle was mysteriously limited. He claimed his closest friends lived in other cities, colleagues from previous jobs who'd moved away for opportunities. His current coworkers were described as boring and stuffy, not the kind of people he wanted to socialize with outside office hours. I spend 40 hours a week with them, he'd say when I suggested meeting them. Why would I want to spend my free time talking shop? I'd rather focus on you, on us, on building something real together. 3 days before the wedding, Emma made a decision that would change everything. She hired a private investigator named Janet Morrison, a former Chicago police detective who specialized in background checks and fraud investigation. I'm not trying to ruin your happiness, Emma told me when I found out. I'm trying to protect you. If Ryan is everything he claims to be, then Janet will confirm that, and I'll apologize for doubting him. But if he's not what, Emma? A con artist? A criminal? You're being paranoid. Maybe, but in my line of work, I've seen too many people get hurt by trusting someone who seemed perfect. Just let Janet do her job. If I'm wrong, you'll have the satisfaction of proving it. The argument that followed was the worst fight Emma and I had ever had. I accused her of being jealous of my happiness, of being unable to accept that someone could love me the way Ryan did. She accused me of being willfully blind to obvious red flags. You're so desperate to believe in this fairy tale that you're ignoring evidence, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. I'm not trying to hurt you, Izzy. I'm trying to save you. Save me from what? From being loved? From being happy? From having someone who wants to take care of me? Save you from being used, Emma replied quietly. Save you from discovering too late that the man you married never existed. Janet Morrison worked fast. Within 48 hours, she'd uncovered information that made my blood run cold. Emma delivered the news at my apartment the night before the wedding, spreading documents across my coffee table like evidence in a crime scene. Ryan Mitchell had no financial advisor license in Illinois or any other state. The office address he'd given me belonged to a mail forwarding service in a strip mall. The BMW was leased under a false name and identity. His successful financial planning business existed only in business cards and carefully crafted lies. But the worst discovery came when Janet ran his fingerprints through the database. Ryan Mitchell's real name was Robert Marcus Kane, and he was a convicted con artist with a history of targeting professional women for elaborate marriage scams. His pattern is consistent, Janet explained, sitting in Emma's living room while I stared at the evidence spread across the coffee table. He identifies successful, caring women who work in helping professions, nurses, teachers, social workers, women who believe in seeing the good in people and who have stable incomes and good credit. The photographs Janet had taken showed Ryan with at least 3 other women over the past 2 years. Different hair color, different style of dress, but the same expensive car, the same romantic gestures, the same engagement ring. He uses the same ring for multiple scams, Janet continued. Proposes with it, gets photos for social proof, then takes it back before the wedding, claiming it needs to be resized or cleaned. The women never see it again. Emma was holding Marcus, who'd fallen asleep during the serious adult conversation. My sister's face showed no satisfaction at being right, only sadness for what I was going through. "There's more, Isabella," Janet said gently. "Based on my investigation, I believe Ryan was planning to disappear after the wedding ceremony, take any cash gifts, max out any credit cards you gave him access to, and vanish. You would have been left with debt and a fake marriage certificate." The police records Janet had obtained painted a picture of a career criminal who'd been running romance scams for over a decade. His real name, Robert Kane, was associated with fraud charges in 6 different states. He'd served 2 years in prison in California for bilking a kindergarten teacher out of her life savings. "The teachers in Sacramento lost everything," Janet explained. "Her retirement account, her house down payment, even her car. She trusted him with access to her finances after he proposed, just like he was setting up with you. I spent that night crying in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the beautiful wedding dress hanging in the corner and the pile of evidence proving that the man I thought I loved never existed." Emma sat with me, holding my hand while I processed the betrayal. "How could I be so stupid?" I sobbed into her shoulder. "Everyone says I'm good at reading people. I work with families in crisis every day. How did I miss all the signs?" "Because he's a professional," Emma said softly. "This is what he does for a living. He studies women like you, learns how to push all the right buttons, how to be exactly what you're looking for. It's not your fault for believing someone who made lying into an art form." But canceling the wedding felt impossible. We'd sent 200 invitations. The church was reserved. The reception hall was decorated. My extended family had flown in from across the country. The vendors were expecting payment. The humiliation of calling it all off seemed overwhelming. "We'll handle the logistics," Dad said firmly when I told my parents the truth at breakfast. "Your safety and well-being are more important than any embarrassment. We'll cancel everything and deal with the financial consequences later." "But what about all the people coming? What about the deposits? What about your life?" Mom interrupted, pulling me into her arms. "What about your future? What about protecting other women from this monster? None of those other things matter compared to stopping a criminal." Emma had already been on the phone with Janet Morrison, coordinating with the Chicago Police Department. They wanted to use the wedding as an opportunity to arrest Ryan in front of witnesses, ensuring he couldn't claim mistaken identity or flee before they had him in custody. "It's risky," Detective Sarah Martinez explained during a meeting at Emma's house. "We'll have undercover officers stationed throughout the church and reception venue, but Ryan might get spooked if he senses something's wrong. Are you sure you can go through with the performance?" The performance. That's what my wedding had become, an elaborate sting operation to catch a career criminal. Detective Martinez laid out the plan in detail. Plainclothes officers would be positioned as wedding guests, strategically placed to prevent any escape routes. The real guests wouldn't know about the operation, maintaining the illusion of a normal ceremony until the moment of arrest. "We need you to act completely normal," Detective Martinez explained. "If Robert Kane suspects anything, he might bolt before we can apprehend him. Can you walk down that aisle knowing what you know and still appear to be a happy bride?" Saturday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth for late November in Chicago. I woke up in Emma's guest room, staring at my wedding dress hanging on the closet door. In a few hours, I'd put it on for the last time, not to marry the love of my life, but to help catch a criminal. Emma helped me get ready with shaking hands. She'd barely slept, worried about all the ways the plan could go wrong. Detective Martinez had insisted that only immediate family know the truth. As far as wedding guests and extended family knew, this was still a celebration. "Are you sure about this?" Emma asked as she fastened my necklace, the pearl strand that had belonged to our grandmother. We can still cancel. We can still just not show up. And let him disappear to hurt someone else? No, we're finishing this. The children were getting ready in the next room. Sarah, at 12, sensed something was wrong, but couldn't articulate it. Tommy, 9, was excited to wear his first real suit. And Marcus, 6-year-old Marcus, was practicing his ring bearer walk and asking 100 questions about the ceremony. Aunt Izzy, why does Uncle Ryan never come to our house anymore? Marcus asked while Emma struggled with his bow tie. He's been busy getting ready for the wedding, sweetheart. But yesterday, when I asked him about our fishing trip, he didn't remember promising to take me, and he called me Michael instead of Marcus. Are grown-ups bad at remembering? Emma and I exchanged glances. Even a 6-year-old was noticing inconsistencies that I'd been trained to overlook. During the final preparation, Marcus continued his innocent observations. Aunt Izzy, Uncle Ryan's wallet fell out of his pocket yesterday when he was using our bathroom. I tried to give it back to him, but he got really mad when I picked it up. Why would someone get mad about being helpful? Sometimes adults are stressed, sweetheart, I said, but a chill ran down my spine. But I saw inside when it opened. Marcus continued with the persistence that only 6-year-olds possess. He has lots of cards with different names. That's weird, right? I only have one name. Emma caught my eye in the mirror as she finished my hair. Marcus had seen more than we realized. St. Mary's Catholic Church looked beautiful, decorated with white lilies and baby's breath exactly as I dreamed. Friends and family filled the pews, everyone dressed in their best clothes and carrying cameras to capture what they believed would be the happiest day of my life. Ryan stood at the altar in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his smile confident and charming. He winked at me as the wedding march began, and for a moment, I almost forgot that everything about him was a lie. Dad walked me down the aisle with steady steps, his arms strong and reassuring under mine. He'd wanted to confront Ryan himself, to call him out as a fraud in front of everyone, but Detective Martinez had convinced him that a controlled arrest was safer than a scene that might allow Ryan to escape. As we processed down the aisle, I spotted the undercover officers Janet had pointed out earlier. They looked like normal wedding guests, but I could see the subtle signs of their training. The way they positioned themselves near exits, the careful attention to their surroundings, the slight bulge of concealed weapons. The ceremony proceeded normally. Father O'Brien read from Corinthians about love being patient and kind, words that felt like mockery given the circumstances. Ryan recited his vows with tears in his eyes, promising to love and cherish me, for better or worse, in sickness and in health. I promise to be the man you deserve, Isabella, he said, his voice breaking with what seemed like genuine emotion, to protect you, honor you, and build a life together that honors the love we share. If I hadn't known better, I would have believed every word. His performance was flawless, convincing enough to fool everyone in the church except the handful of people who knew the truth. When Father O'Brien asked if anyone had reason why we shouldn't be wed, I held my breath. This was the moment Detective Martinez had planned to give the signal for Ryan's arrest. But before the detective could move, before anyone could react, Marcus's clear 6-year-old voice cut through the silence. I have a question, he called out from the front pew, wiggling out of Emma's grip and standing up on the pew. Uncle Ryan, why did you tell Aunt Izzy your name was Ryan when your driver's license says Robert Kane? The church went completely silent. Even the organist stopped playing. You could have heard a pin drop in that sacred space. Marcus, oblivious to the gravity of what he'd just revealed, continued with childlike logic. Yesterday, when you left your wallet in our bathroom, I was trying to be helpful and bring it to you. But the picture looks like you, but the name is different. Mommy says lying is bad. Were you lying about your name? Ryan's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, fear, anger, and finally calculation. He glanced around the church, noticing for the first time the unusually large number of adults positioned at strategic locations who didn't look like typical wedding guests. That's an old ID, he stammered, but his voice had lost all its smooth confidence. From before I legally changed my name, Marcus, little buddy, this isn't the time for questions. But Marcus wasn't finished. With the persistence that only 6-year-olds possess, he pressed on. But why would you change your name from Robert Kane to Ryan Mitchell? That's a weird thing to do. And why do you have so many different credit cards with different names? I saw them when your wallet fell open. Emma was trying to get Marcus to sit down, her face pale with horror. She'd known he was observant, but she hadn't realized he'd seen Ryan's wallet contents. Wedding guests began murmuring, sensing that something was terribly wrong, but not understanding what. My elderly relatives looked confused, whispering to each other in Mandarin. Ryan's supposed friends and colleagues, who I now realized were probably strangers he'd hired for the occasion, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And another thing, Marcus continued, completely unaware of the chaos he was creating. Why don't you know my name? You keep calling me Michael, but my name is Marcus. Adults are supposed to remember kids' names. Detective Martinez and her team were already moving, but Ryan had realized the trap. He pushed past Father O'Brien and bolted toward the side exit of the church. Stop! Police! Detective Martinez shouted, and chaos erupted. Wedding guests screamed and dove under pews. My elderly great-aunt Helen fainted. The photographer kept shooting pictures, thinking it was some kind of elaborate performance art. The string quartet continued playing for several confused seconds before finally stopping. Ryan made it halfway to the door before Detective Martinez tackled him to the ground in front of the altar. His perfectly styled hair was disheveled, his expensive tuxedo torn, and his charming facade completely shattered. Robert Marcus Kane, you're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny, Detective Martinez announced as she handcuffed him. The irony wasn't lost on me that Marcus, whose full name was Marcus David Thompson, had been the one to expose Robert Marcus Kane. Two people with the same middle name, one innocent and honest, the other manipulative and criminal. As Ryan was led away in handcuffs, he turned back to look at me one last time. The mask was completely off now. Where I'd once seen love and devotion in his eyes, I now saw cold calculation and fury. You have no idea what you've cost me, Isabella. He snarled. You were supposed to be easy money. Stupid, trusting nurses always are. Those words, spoken in front of 200 witnesses, removed any lingering doubt I might have had about his guilt or the reality of what I'd narrowly escaped. The aftermath was a blur of police statements, canceled vendors, and confused relatives. Emma handled most of the logistics while I sat in the church basement, still in my wedding dress, trying to process what had just happened. Detective Martinez found me there an hour later, her official business completed. We've taken him into custody, she said gently. The FBI is involved now since this crosses state lines. Your nephew's testimony, along with the evidence we've gathered, should put Robert Kane away for a very long time. What happens now? I asked, feeling numb and overwhelmed. Now you get to rebuild your life, she said, on your own terms, with the truth instead of lies. Marcus found me in the church basement later, still in his ring-bearer outfit, but with his bow tie crooked and chocolate cake frosting on his face. Someone had salvaged pieces of the wedding cake from the reception that never happened. Aunt Izzy, are you sad? He asked, climbing up on the folding chair next to me. A little bit, sweetheart, but mostly I'm grateful. Grateful for what? Grateful that you're so observant. Grateful that you asked questions. Grateful that you told the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Marcus nodded seriously. Mommy says telling the truth is always right, even when it's hard. Did I do the right thing? You did exactly the right thing, Marcus. You might have saved my whole life. Will Uncle Ryan go to jail? Yes, sweetheart, he will. Good, Marcus said with 6-year-old certainty. He was lying, and lying is wrong. Plus, he never remembered my name, and that's rude. 6 months later, I was back at work in the NICU, caring for premature babies and their worried families. The routine of 12-hour shifts and the joy of watching tiny lives grow stronger had helped heal my heart in ways I hadn't expected. Ryan, or Robert Kane, had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for running con games in multiple states. The investigation revealed that I would have been his 7th victim. The other 6 women had lost a combined total of over $500,000 in cash, credit debt, and stolen jewelry. Detective Martinez stopped by the hospital one afternoon to update me on the case. Your nephew's testimony was crucial, she told me over coffee in the cafeteria. Most 6-year-olds can't provide coherent evidence in court, but Marcus was incredible. He remembered details that adult witnesses missed. The defense attorney couldn't shake his story because it was completely truthful. The trial had been a media sensation. 6-year-old exposes wedding day con artist made headlines across the country. Marcus had become an unlikely hero, though Emma and David worked hard to keep him grounded and protected from too much attention. The civil cases against Ryan were ongoing. I'd been lucky. Because the arrest happened before the ceremony was completed, I hadn't lost any money beyond wedding deposits. But other victims were still fighting to recover their savings and repair their credit. Emma and I grew closer through the experience. She never said, "I told you so," never made me feel stupid for being deceived. Instead, she helped me understand that trusting nature isn't a character flaw. It's a strength that requires protection. You see good in people because you are good. She told me during one of our weekly sister dinners, "The world needs more people like you, Isabella. Don't let one criminal change that about yourself." But I had changed, in some ways for the better. I was more cautious about new relationships, more aware of red flags, more willing to ask uncomfortable questions. When Dr. James Wright, a new pediatric surgeon, asked me out 8 months after the trial, I said yes, but I also did my homework. I verified his medical license, visited his apartment, met his colleagues, and asked Emma to run a basic background check. Dr. Wright thought it was amusing rather than insulting. Any woman who's been through what you have deserves to feel completely safe, he said when I explained my precautions. I'd rather you trust me because you verified my character than trust me blindly and regret it later. The relationship developed slowly and naturally. No expensive gifts or over-the-top romantic gestures, just genuine compatibility, shared values, and the kind of steady trust that builds over time. Marcus, now 7, appointed himself my official boyfriend evaluation committee. Dr. James passed all my tests, he announced seriously during Sunday dinner at Emma's house. He knows my real name, he remembers conversations, and his driver's license matches what he told us. Also, he's really good at Minecraft. High praise from the master detective, Emma laughed, ruffling Marcus's hair. The wedding dress still hangs in my closet. I haven't decided whether to donate it, save it for a future ceremony, or keep it as a reminder of the day a 6-year-old's honesty saved my life. Some days it feels like a symbol of naive trust. Other days it represents the courage to believe in love despite betrayal. Marcus has become something of a local celebrity at his elementary school. His teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, uses his story as an example of why children should trust their instincts and speak up when something feels wrong. Sometimes adults get so focused on being polite that they ignore obvious problems, she explained during a parent-teacher conference. Marcus shows us that asking direct questions isn't rude, it's necessary. The school district even brought in experts to talk to students about recognizing deception and trusting their instincts. Marcus became the poster child for childhood honesty and observation skills. The wedding photos from that day are surreal to look at. The first half shows a beautiful ceremony, a radiant bride, a handsome groom. The second half shows police officers, chaos, and a criminal in handcuffs. But my favorite photo is one the photographer captured without realizing its significance. Marcus standing on the pew, pointing at Ryan with 6-year-old determination, surrounded by shocked adults who were all about to witness justice in action. Last month, I received a letter from one of Ryan's other victims, a teacher named Patricia from Milwaukee, who'd been scammed 2 years before I met him. "Your nephew's courage gave me strength to testify at Robert's trial," she wrote. I'd been too ashamed to report the fraud initially, but watching a 6-year-old stand up for what's right made me realize that staying silent only helps criminals hurt more people. Thank you for raising awareness about romance scams and for showing other victims that it's not our fault for trusting someone who made lying their profession. The letter reminded me that Marcus's moment of truth had impact beyond just saving me. His innocent questions had helped ensure that a career criminal would spend years in prison instead of continuing to destroy women's lives. During our family's recent Christmas gathering, Marcus was playing with his new detective kit, a gift from Detective Martinez, who'd stayed in touch with our family. He was examining fingerprints and taking notes in a small spiral notebook, completely absorbed in his investigation of the cookie thief, his older brother Tommy. "Aunt Izzy," he said, looking up from his magnifying glass, "do you think I should be a detective when I grow up?" "I think you already are a detective, sweetheart. The best kind, the kind who speaks truth even when it's scary. Will you help me solve more mysteries?" "As long as you promise to keep asking the questions that adults are too afraid to ask." He nodded solemnly, then returned to his investigation with renewed focus. "Doctor, Wright has been wonderfully patient with my cautious approach to relationships. He understands why I need verification and proof, why I ask direct questions about his past and present. He's met Marcus multiple times and passed every one of his innocent but perceptive tests. Your nephew has excellent instincts," Dr. Wright told me after Marcus grilled him about his middle name, his college graduation year, and his favorite ice cream flavor during 3 separate visits. "If a 6-year-old approves of me, I must be doing something right." The hospital staff has rallied around me in ways I never expected. Dr. Williams, my mentor, has become protective of my personal life, offering advice and support as I navigate dating again. "Trust is like a muscle," she told me. "After an injury, you have to rebuild it slowly and carefully, but that doesn't mean you should never use it again." Jessica Martinez, my fellow nurse and friend, helps me process the ongoing effects of the deception. She listens when I have doubts about my judgment, reminds me of my strengths when I feel vulnerable. "You trusted someone who was professionally trained to be trustworthy," she says. "That's not a character flaw. That's being human. The fact that you survived it and helped catch him shows incredible strength." The therapy sessions Dr. Martinez recommended have been helpful in processing the psychological impact of the betrayal. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Chen, specializes in victims of romantic fraud. Romance scams are particularly devastating because they attack our fundamental human need for connection, she explained during one session. The victims aren't gullible or stupid. They're normal people who had the misfortune of encountering a skilled predator. Learning that Robert Kane had spent years perfecting his techniques, studying psychology and manipulation tactics, helped me understand that I wasn't uniquely foolish. I was simply unlucky enough to cross paths with a professional criminal. The support groups Dr. Chen recommended connected me with other women who'd experienced similar betrayals. Hearing their stories, their recovery processes, their eventual triumphs over the trauma, has been both heartbreaking and inspiring. "The hardest part isn't the money or the humiliation," said Janet, a kindergarten teacher from Milwaukee who'd lost her life savings to a different con artist. "It's learning to trust your own judgment again. But we all get there eventually." 6 months ago, I thought I was living a fairy tale. A beautiful prince had swept me off my feet, promising a perfect life filled with love and security. The reality was a nightmare, a carefully constructed lie designed to drain my resources and leave me broken. But fairy tales aren't really about princes and princesses. They're about good triumphing over evil, truth conquering deception, and heroes emerging from unexpected places. My hero wasn't a knight in shining armor. He was a 6-year-old boy in a wrinkled suit with chocolate on his face, armed with nothing but curiosity and a commitment to honesty. Marcus saved me from marrying a criminal, but more importantly, he taught me that the most powerful question in any language is why. Why doesn't your story add up? Why won't you answer direct questions? Why should I believe you when the evidence suggests otherwise? These days, when young nurses at the hospital ask me about dating advice, I tell them about Marcus. I tell them to find their own 6-year-old perspective, to ask uncomfortable questions, and trust their instincts when something feels wrong. Love isn't supposed to require you to ignore red flags, I tell them. Real love welcomes questions because it has nothing to hide. Real love wants you to feel safe and certain, not confused and uncertain. The hospital has asked me to speak at training sessions about recognizing manipulation and maintaining professional boundaries. My experience with Ryan has made me more aware of how predators operate, skills that translate to protecting vulnerable patients and families. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever felt pressured to ignore your instincts for the sake of romance, Please remember Marcus's lesson. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is speak up, ask direct questions, and trust a child's simple logic over an adult's complicated explanations. And if you're ever in a situation where something feels wrong, but everyone else seems convinced it's right, be the 6-year-old who stands up and asks why. The truth is always worth defending, even when it's inconvenient, uncomfortable, or embarrassing. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the most important message. Sometimes saving someone else starts with having the courage to ask one honest question. And sometimes the greatest act of love is preventing someone from making a terrible mistake, even if it ruins what they thought they wanted. Marcus didn't just save me from a bad marriage. He saved me from losing faith in my own judgment, from years of financial recovery, and from the shame of being another victim who stayed silent. He reminded me that truth-telling is not just a childhood virtue. It's a superpower that can change lives, stop criminals, and protect the innocent. In a world full of complicated adult problems, sometimes we need a 6-year-old's clarity to see what's right in front of us. Sometimes we need someone who hasn't learned to be polite at the expense of being truthful. Sometimes we need our own Marcus, whether that's a literal child in our lives or the childlike honesty we carry within ourselves, to stand up in the most important moments and ask the questions that save us from our own blind spots. The wedding that never was became the day my real life began. Not the fairy tale I thought I wanted, but the honest, authentic life I actually needed. And it all started with a 6-year-old boy who noticed that a grown man's driver's license didn't match the name he was using to marry his aunt. In the end, that's all it took. One observant child, one honest question, and the courage to speak truth in a room full of people who were about to witness a beautiful lie. The experience has taught me that family isn't just about blood relations or shared last names. Family is about the people who protect you, who notice when something's wrong, who have the courage to speak up even when it's difficult. Marcus is my family. Emma is my family. Dr. Wright is becoming my family. The colleagues who supported me, the detectives who believed me, the other victims who shared their stories with me, they're all family in the truest sense. And sometimes the most profound act of love is a 6-year-old's innocent question that changes everything.